We advise if the opinions and views of the hosts and guests do not reflect those of the station.
You are what you watch.
Hello, my name is Harriton Bodko and welcome to our program. Tonight's topic, I know you're going to find this a little bit intriguing. It's called rule of force. Now let's go to the other side of the pendulum, which is rule of law. Ladies and gentlemen, when you're confronted with something that is wrong, mali, yung hindi tama, mali, it stays like that. No matter what you do, even if you force it, it still stays wrong. Now, take, for example, dynasty, the rule on dynasty. Now, it says very clearly in our Constitution na walang dynasty. Now, sure, the implementing guidelines of no dynasty has not been set in motion by Congress. It still does not mean that it's in the Constitution that we can go against dynasty. It's very clear. It says no dynasty. And yet, many of our leaders, no less the Senate, the President, the congressmen, all the way down, alam niyo po, ginawang karera ang gobyerno. Now, if you wish to make a career out of government, there's nothing wrong with that. Gee, join the different government agencies from the very beginning and work your way up. But when you're given a mandate or you're given an appointed position, don't make a career out of it. Once you're done, get out. Don't stay there for the next 40, 50 years and then say this is your bailiwick. Ano ito? You own the people? Now, the problem with the people naman, the voters, they know no better. Now, I tweeted someone in Muntinlupa. I asked how do you understand the concept of dynasty and how do you address it? Ang sagot po sa akin, let the people decide. Ladies and gentlemen, just because the people become the majority does not make anything right or wrong. What is wrong stays wrong. And you cannot force an act of wrongdoing to become right because it's become a practice. In the Philippines, we call it tradition. No, when tradition is wrong, it is still wrong. Now, this is the problem. Know the difference. Because in this country, it seems what becomes a practice and tradition, however wrong, becomes all of a sudden right. Let's not fool each other. Now, when we talk of these issues, I've got the best guest, perfect for this attitude, perfect for this topic. You all know him. We have Attorney Alan Pagia. Hi, Attorney. Kamusta na?
Hi, Ari. Thank you for having me.
I always love it when you're in front of me, and I enjoy it when I can be with you, banter the different issues that go along. And most especially, before you even go towards the topic, your last article was most intriguing. When you brought up the issue with the Visiting Forces Agreement, the treaties against the United States when it comes to the relationship of the U.S. and us. And you clearly stated, mali ito, this is wrong. This is not a treaty. Very briefly, your point of view on that issue.
We were talking about the 1994 RP-US Extradition Treaty na pinatupad na ng ilang ulit, sila Charlie Atong-Ang, sila Mark Jimenez, sila Glenn Dumlao, sila Michael Reaquino. Binalik sila paulit-ulit na. Pero ngayon, na nagkaroon ako ng 2 taong tinutulungan na nakapiit ngayon sa NBI, na sa pag-susuri natin, nakita ko wala palang ratification. The 2/3 ratification by the Senate are not on record. There is none on record.
Wala silang pinirmahan. Di ba sinabi nila yun, may 2/3 na nakapirma? Wala.
Wala. Ang nakapirma, yung representative ng government of the Republic and of the Philippines and the government of the U.S., yung mga kinatawan.
Okay.
Pero kailangan doon, bukod doon, ayon na rin sa Article 20 ng tratado, itong tratadong ito ay hindi magiging epektibo hanggat hindi nagkakaroon ng palitan ng tinatawag na instruments of ratification, which, according to the Philippine and American Constitution, two-thirds of the Senate.
Maliwanag yan.
Wala. It's as simple as that. Wala. Ba't nyo ipinapatupad? Kasi kaya nyong brasuhin yung mga taong individual.
Correct.
Hindi
Parang
tama
ganun.
yan. Because that would be yung sinasabi mo kanina na pamamayani ng dahas, hindi pamamayani ng batas.
So the rule of force, that is a perfect example of one of the issues on the rule of force.
Yes.
Attorney, you're a man of law, you're a man of the academe, and you've practiced for many years. And you're not exactly separated from the people. No? You understand how the people tick, the other lawyers that you have to deal with, and the businessmen. How is it, knowing the rule of force is in effect, why do the people in the Philippines allow such a stupid idea to allow what is wrong and what is illegal to become legal?
Because of what you mentioned earlier. Many people, even lawyers, they think in terms of tradition, yung nakagawian na. Nakakalimutan nila na sa sarili nating Kodigo Sibil, merong Article 7 na sinasabi, ang batas ay napapalitan lamang ng mga bagong batas. At ang paglabag dito o ang hindi paggalang dito ay hindi maipagpapaumanhin ng hindi paggamit ng custom o kaugalian o ng salungat na kagawian. Practice to the contrary. Batas yan. Kaya ginagamit nila, katulad ditong appointment ng Chief Justice, sabi natin, wala sa saligang batas yan, pero sabi nila, matagal nang ginagawa yan. But even practice to the contrary is not a mode of amending the Constitution. Sinabi mo kanina, political dynasty. 1987, ipinagbawal na ng sambayan ng Pilipino. Bawal, ayaw natin ng political dynasty as may be defined by Congress. Anong ginawa ng Kongreso? Mula 1987 hanggang ngayon,
Tinuloy.
walang definition ng political dynasty. Kaya, ngayon, kung titingin ka sa kapaligiran ng ating pamumulitika, namumutik-tik sa dinastiya, isang pamilya, isang pangalan, ang nakakalat. Hindi ko sila binabatigas dahil kaibigan natin ng marami dyan. Pero ang sinasabi natin, tayo ba ay susunod sa batas na tayo rin mismo ang nag-aproba, at tulad ng saligang batas, o tayo ang unang lalabag dito? Dahil pagtatawanan tayo ng buong mundo kapag hindi natin sinusunod ang sarili nating batas.
Well, right now, hindi na natin sinusundan ang sarili nating batas, and this is obvious. Ikaw, you're a man of law. Why is it pumapayag ang mga tao, gaya mga abogado, abogasya, mga eskwelahan, mga akademya, na nagtuturo ng abogadasya, law? Why is it pinapayagan? And it's become tradition, like you said. Why are we so complacent na pinapayagan natin na lahat ng kamalian ang nangyayari? Gaya niya, let's stay on dynasty para madali. You need not define the meaning of dynasty. Everybody knows the meaning of dynasty. Of course, you need the implementing guidelines as far as penalties. But the meaning of dynasty, I think, is quite clear.
Correct.
It's like saying, okay, the rule of law, define law. Define rule and define off.
Alam na natin yan.
No, or even the article, off. I mean, ano ito, stupidity? The game of stupidity, and we force it. And then it becomes tradition. Why do we allow ourselves? Weren't you were the one who was very specific to me. I remember some 3 years ago. Harry, if you have no rule of law, you have tyranny.
Yes.
When you have tyranny, it's anarchy and all for one, one for all. The only thing that can hold society together is rule of law.
Yes.
It's the only thing that will hold us civil towards each other. Kung hindi, we'll be like animals. I'm hungry, I want something you have, give it to me, I will grab it. Hindi yung, bawal yan. May batas yan. You cannot grab anything on my body. Why is it sa Pilipinas, gustong-gusto natin yung rule of force?
kakulangan ng pangunawa. Yung rule of law, which means nobody is above the law, ay higit nating mauunawaan kung titingnan natin yung anino nito. Kumbaga, the brightness of light is measured by the degree of darkness of the shadow. Ano yung
Wow, bigat. Sige.
ano yung anino ng rule of law? Yun ang tinatawag na sinasabi mo kanina na rule of force.
Yes.
The essential distinction is, in the rule of law, you should do what you must do. Yung rule of force, if you can do it, do it. Kaya nga yung sa magnanakaw, kahit na hindi niya dapat gawin, hindi siya dapat kumuha ng hindi sa kanya, kung kaya niyang nakawin, nanakawin niya. Sa rule of law, kahit pwede mong nakawin, hindi mo na nakawin kasi hindi mo dapat gawin. Ay doon nagkakatalo. Naging kasanayan, naging kagawian na yung ating mga pinuno ay kinukuha kahit na ginagawa kahit na yung hindi dapat gawin. Yung hindi karapat-dapat sa posisyon, hinahalal o itinatalaga dahil kaya nilang ihalal, kaya nilang manalo sa kampanya kahit hindi naman sila pinakamagaling na dapat umuko pa doon sa tanggapang iyon.
The absolute rule when it comes to any conflict, arbitration, mediation, or any just complaint is the Court Supreme. You were the one who told me, even though you suffered the consequence of the Supreme Court, and you stood by it, and you kept it, you allowed 8 years of your life to go to sleep, that we have to follow the Supreme Court because it's the Court Absolute. Why is it the Court Absolute, the Supreme Court, has allowed all these wrongdoings to take place? Why is it the Supreme Court has allowed itself to be under, for example, the President and Congress? There were so many contestations by so many legal minds, and yet, nabaliwala. Do we still have a Supreme Court? Is it still effective? I mean, or are we now in the age of tyranny and we just don't know it yet?
Not yet. It's not yet tyranny.
It's getting there.
But your question is a very beautiful question which should be clarified in its answer. The answer to that is a distinction in law, a distinction between office and the officer. You see, the court is an office, but the officers are the justices. And it is a dictum in law, according to the case of Urbano versus Chavez, which says that the public office cannot act without an officer. And the act of the officer is the act of the public office, provided the action is within the scope of legal authority. In other words, if the public officer acts beyond the scope of legal authority, that is not the act of the officer. That is the personal liability. That is the trespass. That is the trespass of the public officer who falsely represent the office. In other words, since the government cannot do anything wrong, that is a dictum. It is the government official that does the wrong.
Correct.
The
That I
government,
can follow.
The government can only act in accordance with law because it's an artificial being. But in practice, the actions
officer.
of government, the officer abuses the authority of the office and acts beyond the authority of the law.
Following that line of thought, Alan, attorney, has the office of the Supreme Court become inutile then?
There are some instances which will give justification to that conclusion or to that point of view.
My gosh, I cite you many, and I'm not a lawyer.
Oh yes, because you see, in law school, we tell our students, class, it is all right for you to violate the law. You will always have some lawyer to defend you. It is all right for you to violate the Constitution. You will always have some lawyer to defend you. But it is not all right for you to violate common sense, because then no lawyer can defend you. And everybody, every Juan, Pedro, and Romeo will be competent to indict you with violation or betrayal of public trust. And there are examples where even the Supreme Court appear to have violated even common sense?
That is the question I'm trying to get
All
at.
right,
I know.
so-
Is there an answer to that question?
There is an
Intriguing
example.
as it sounds, yeah.
There is an example. This example about public funds worth 80 billion pesos, COCO levy funds,
Okay.
as public fund, was declared owned privately by the presidential uncle,
Yes.
Dandinko Wangko. And the vote is, never mind the details, never mind the reasoning, but the public funds, 80 billion, declared private funds in favor of a party.
Correct.
The voting is what the Filipino people should look at. Court and Bank, Supreme Court and Bank has 15 members. But the voting in this particular issue is 7 for the presidential uncle, 4 against, and 4 abstention. The commonsensical question of the Filipino people is, Your Honors, is 7 the rule of majority in an in-bank court of 15? Surely it's less than 50%. Therefore, it violates common sense that this decision will be forced on us to be accepted as jurisprudence. Another example would be somebody
But
is...
doesn't that the numbers change when there is abstention?
No, it's still 15. And bank.
Abstention means,
Abstention, they refuse to vote for one
but it does
reason or
not
another.
mean, abstention, indecision, does not mean no.
No. It's
It does
neutral.
not.
It's
It's
neutral.
neutral.
Yes. It will not be counted.
And the 4 that said no, plus the 4, which becomes the majority,
The 4 will now be 0.
correct.
So the 4 will be counted as 4 dissenting. And then the 7,
Pro.
4.
4.
Yes.
But it's
the
still
question
not-
is, 7 is not
It's
the
not
rule,
8.
It's
It's
not
not
the
8.
rule of majority
Not
in
the
15.
rule of majority.
Why? Democracy in its barest irreducible essence simply means rule of majority. So how can you explain to grade 1 pupils, Filipino pupils, that 7 is the rule of majority in a court of 15? You cannot. Therefore, it's violative of common sense. Therefore, even our cameramen will protest against
I
that.
thought the rule of majority when it comes to 15, minus 4, I mag-participate, majority becomes 11.
No.
Not necessarily.
No,
It
no,
still
no.
stays at 15.
Yes.
That's why. That's
That's why in the appointment of the Chief Justice, this came into fore again. Why?
Abstention.
The Constitution uses 3 labels to identify the composition of the Supreme Court. They refer to the 15 as members. And then they also use the word associate justices. They refer to 14. And then they use the word Chief Justice. It refers to 1. Now, the Constitution says the members, the 15, shall be appointed by the President. Does that include the Chief Justice? Not necessarily. Why? Because a member of the Supreme Court is not necessarily the Chief Justice, while the Chief Justice is necessarily a member. So, it will be a fallacious reasoning which we cannot sell to our students in law school to say that if the members shall be appointed by the President, that includes the Chief Justice. You cannot do that because then you will have to turn blind to the substantial distinction between the Chief
15.
Justice as against the Associate Justices.
Why is it nakakalusot yan? Yan ang, I guess, that's the point.
Because they can do it. And then there is no more appeal from the decision of the 14, from the decision of the 15.
And when the Supreme Court errs, it's still absolute.
Technically, theoretically, no. Because when the 15 justices vote in a way that contravenes a specific constitutional principle, then their decision is void.
So the Supreme Court, to begin with, is not above the Constitution.
No,
They
because
work within.
nobody is above the law. They are supposed to interpret the Constitution, not change it.
Yes,
They're supposed to clarify the Constitution, not change it.
correct. But when they err and they make false judgments and they force the rule of force, when they err, it still becomes correct.
No. But for the time being, there would appear no legal remedy.
Okay. How would you correct? How would you create a remedy to situation like
It would
this?
be political. It would require perhaps revolution. It would require a tremendous political will on the part of the chief executive to do that, or on the part of the leaders of the legislature to be able to do that, to tell the Supreme Court justices to their faces, this is contrary to the Constitution.
Well, what's happening now is it's the other way around. We have a situation wherein it's now the other side, the other branches of government. Well, it is telling the Supreme Court what is right and what is wrong. The Supreme Court has cowered down. It's scared. Its tail is behind its ass, so to speak. And it abides by the dictum of the chief executive and the legislation. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is what we saw with the Corona impeachment. Now, we've got another situation when it was contested that the JBC should not have been legally formed without the Chief Justice, without the second in command, who was the Associate Justice Carpio, who was the eldest, the most senior, who also sat back and making only 12, correct? 13, making the decision as of who will be the next, the JBC.
Yes.
You see, when a contestation like that comes on, rather than solve it, it's called a crisis, correct?
Yes.
How come whoever is most powerful becomes the person who gets to resolve the issue? In this case, it was the president.
Well, I will have to take part of the blame because I'm part of the legal profession.
That's-
And
yes,
the president
It's
is
not.
not a lawyer,
Yeah.
so he depends on the legal
So-
advisors.
So it's the fault of the legalists to have allowed this to date.
Yes.
It is not the president's fault.
Yes.
To the president, he sees this is the only solution. He may be
That
correct.
is what his legal advisors tell him. He cannot do otherwise.
So, if the legalists and the legal community stand by, which is what they've done until today,
And by just keeping quiet, they also abet the mistake.
yes. Well, I've always said, indecision is always a no. A deafening silence is always a no as well. Adjusting and agreeing to it is what we call silence, which is paramount to what we've been doing in the last decade.
In the law and evidence, silence means yes.
I didn't realize that.
Silence
because in business,
is an admission.
ganun eh.
Yes, you have to say no.
You have
That's
to
why
say no.
you have to you have to make a specific denial. A general denial is equivalent to admission.
Wow. Galing talaga ng law, no? We're going to have to take a short break. Ladies and gentlemen, the exercise of what Alan and I are going through is not necessarily trying to put down the Supreme Court, the legalists, the president, the legislators. No. It's an exercise of trying to understand what is correct because we have to stand up with what is correct. The rule of law is not there simply to be a convenience and not to be a guideline for you and I. No. It is supposed to be with strict adherence because only then can we become really civilized. Now, when we have issues with a conflicting party, when we cannot go to the law, to the courts, there is no longer any redress. This is when chaos begins. Like Attorney Allen has said, because you can do it, you do it, not because you should not be doing it. The point is, without rule of law, we are all lost. Now, we're going to continue. We're going to talk more about what we call the rule of force. Stay with us. We'll be right back.